Welcome to this video on Vue.js and Firebase Cloud Firestore. I'm Gareth, aka MancDev, and thanks for taking the time to watch this tutorial. This is a series of tutorials explaining how to use Vue.js and Firebase Cloud Firestore in a stripped back way. And when I say that, I mean that we're just going to be using a HTML page, an editor and a browser. We're not going to be using CLIs or Node or NPM or Webpack. We're going to be stripping it right back to basics so that there's nothing else to learn to get going developing full stack apps other than Vue.js and Firebase Cloud Firestore. First of all, let's take a look at why we want to use Vue on Firebase Cloud Firestore. Let's take a look at Vue first of all. Now, Vue is a very approachable framework. In fact, if there was one word I would use to explain it, I would say approachable, because it's so simple to get into it. And if you're an AngularJS developer and perhaps hasn't been too keen on the move to Angular 2, then Vue will certainly be a breath of fresh air. One of the other surprising things about Vue is that rather than Angular or React, it hasn't got a huge technology company behind it. It's just one guy and a team of open source developers, and that guy is called Evan You, and he's an ex-Googler, and he developed Vue initially to be quite a cut down version of Angular for much smaller scale apps, because AngularJS was originally used to build parts of Google's AdWords platform and their internal CRM, so really big apps. And he was working on smaller apps, so he needed a smaller framework, and so he produced Vue. When you consider it's just been created by one individual, it's really surprising that it's become one of the big three front-end frameworks. And I think that just highlights just what a nerve that Vue has hit amongst developers, that it's risen above all of the JavaScript fatigue, and it's really risen to be one of the top frameworks. In fact, in 2018, it's set to overtake Angular in popularity. And there's good reason for that, as we'll find out in this tutorial. Now, one of the big reasons that you can get started so easily with Vue, and you don't need any of the usual build tools, although you can, and certainly you will want to do that as you get more experience and as you want to build bigger apps. But Vue allows you to get going without having any of that in your way. And that's what we're going to be highlighting in this tutorial, is that we can use Vue just with a HTML page and just by putting in a link to a CDN. With Firebase Cloud Firestore, I consider it to be a little bit of a no-brainer really, because it's a serverless database. We can call into it directly from our application, and it's so simple to get going. Again, we don't need any CLIs, we don't need any build tools, we can just put a CDN in there, although as with Vue we can and we'll want to move into that as you build bigger and more professional apps. But with Firebase, I started using it in about 2014. In fact, I made a video back then and I was absolutely amazed by just how brilliant it was. The trouble was at the time is that its querying facilities were fairly limited, and there's a couple of other limitations as well, but it got acquired by Google and they've developed Firebase into a complete platform where the real-time database, which is what Firebase originally was, is now just one element of it. And they, back in October of 2017, they brought out Cloud Firestore. And Cloud Firestore is like the next iteration of the real-time database, in that it allows for better querying, better organisation of data into collections and things like that. So for me, it's a no-brainer as a back-end to get going with it, and it brings in the full stack element to it. So we've got the client side with Vue, and we've got the server side back-end database with Firebase. So let's get going. In these tutorials I'll be using Visual Studio Code, but obviously you can use any editor that you like. I really like Code, and if you want to use it you can go to code.visualstudio.com and download it. It's available for Mac, Windows and Linux. So I'm going to open up Code and I'm going to create a new folder. So to do that, I'm going to click Open Folder. I'm just going to create myself a new folder on there. I'm going to call it VueFire. Okay, and when that's saved, I'm going to click the little new file icon next to the folder name, and I'm just going to create a new file. And as I said before, we're just going to be using a single index.html file. Okay, and we just need to flesh our page out. I'll do that quickly now just so we don't waste any time. Okay, so we've got our skeleton page in place there. We've got our head, our body and our script. So what we need to do now is to add our VueFire CDN. So if we go to our browser and we look at vuejs.org and we click on the Get Started button there, and we just scroll down a little bit under Getting Started, we can see our CDN link. So just copy that and then back in our editor, just paste it above the opening script tag, and we've got our CDN library in there for Vue. Okay, so to get going with Vue is very straightforward. All that we need to do really is to create a Vue instance object, and that will contain all of the methods and variables and objects that we need to develop our app. So we're going to say let app equals new Vue. Okay, and then open it up and then pass in an object. And the object we're going to be passing in is going to contain everything that we need. So just to get started for the beginning, the only thing we're going to add in there is the L property, or EL, which is short for element. And all that we're doing there is to tell Vue what ID an element has to identify it as being the container for our Vue app in the actual HTML template. So we're going to say hashtag app in there, and so to get that identified on our template inside of our body, we're going to create a container div tag, and we're just going to say div ID equals app. Okay, and all it means is that everything in that div now is related to the Vue app that we've created, or the Vue instance object that we've created. And it's important to note this ID, where we said ID equals app, is not related to the variable name, it's related to the EL property. So we could put in there, in the EL property, we could put my new app, for example, change the ID on the div to my new app, and the result would be the same. For previous AngularJS developers, just make a note that you can't actually put the app onto the body. It has to be on a separate div, so just make a note of that. So this is all great, but we're not actually doing anything yet. We want to give the app some life now. So to do that, what we'll do is we'll display the name of the app on the page. However, we'll do that via data binding and using a variable rather than hard coding it onto the template. Now in Vue, the way that you hold your data variables or your Vue model is in an object called data. So we'll add that to our Vue instance object. And like I say, all of our objects and variables now that we need to access in the template now belong in this data object. So let's say we want to create a variable called app title. Okay, and we're going to call that employee magic, because our app is going to be an employee tracker that's going to let companies store their employees' names, their job title, departments, their age. It could be any kind of details, but we're going to limit it to those in this app. And it really is going to be a tour de force of employee stroke HR kind of software apps. So employee magic, it certainly is. So what we can do there to display that on our page is using data binding. I'm sure that anybody that's worked with a framework before will know what data binding is, but it's essentially a way to put variables from your app onto the page. And we do that the standard old way using double curly braces. And we'll just put in the app title. Okay, we'll wrap it into a H1 just so it displays nicely. We'll save that and we'll have a look at it in our browser. Refresh that. Okay, there we go. There's our title. Now that's what we call interpolation or data binding, where the Vue app is essentially recognises that there's a data binding on a particular variable and keeps a watch out for any changes, and then pops it on whenever there is a change. So far so good, but it looks a little bit plain Jane. You know, we just got the bog standard browser font. So what we'll do is, to give it a little bit of styling, we'll put the Bootstrap library in. So if we go to our browser and we go to getbootstrap.com, and once we're there we click on get started, and we can see we've got CSS. We've got a little button there called copy to clipboard, so we'll click that, go back to our editor, and just in the header underneath the title tag we'll just paste that in there. Okay, and we'll save that and refresh it in our browser again, and we can see we've got a little bit of styling in there. It just makes it look that bit better. However, if you notice, it's always displayed right up against the top left corner. I want to put a bit of a margin in there just to give it a bit more style. So, you know, normally we just create a style sheet, we'd add that style into our CSS. However, what we can do with Vue is we can add that styling as a variable into our app, and we can change it so that you can change the styles programmatically. So let's go back to our editor, and what we'll need to do is to create another div tag, because in our container div tag we're declaring the app, we can't put any more directives in. We've got to create another div tag in there. So we'll create another div tag. We'll make sure that our header is within that new div tag. Okay. On that div tag we can use a Vue directive called v-bind, and we will use a colon and we will say style, and we'll give it the name of a variable that we can use. So what we'll do, down on our data, we'll create a new variable on the Vue model underneath our app title, and we'll call this main style. And we'll make it an object because we may want to add different styles within this particular variable. So we'll just, for now, just create a margin of 20 pixels, just as we would in a normal style sheet. And what we can do up here, where we've got our v-bind colon style equals main style. Okay, so basically we're binding to this div the styles that we've got in this particular object, this variable here. Okay, so we'll save that. Get in our browser, we'll refresh, and we can see that our margin is set now. So it's interesting to know that when you're using Vue directives such as v-bind style, it does offer you a more short-handed way of doing it by simply dropping the v-bind. So if you just sees colon style, it knows what to do. So we could have just used div colon style equals main style instead. Throughout these tutorials I continue to use a more verbose version to show the full directives consistently. However, where we come across a new directive and there is a shorthand version available, I'll highlight it for you just so that you know. Generally speaking, through development you will use the shorthanded version of the directives, but I just want to show you what the original full hand version is. We've so far covered what Vue.js and Firebase Cloud Firestore are, why we're using them as a framework and platform for this app, and the basics of setting up a simple HTML page to build our employee tracker app, Employee Magic. We've set up our Vue object, we've done some basic data binding, set up our Vue model data object, and we've done some styling using a Vue directive. In the next 4 parts of this tutorial, I'll focus on covering CRUD, which is create, read, retrieve, update and delete. So in part 2 we'll deal with creating records on our Firestore for our employees, and we'll get more into Firestore as we're doing this. And these are the basics of adding any kind of line of business stroke database application. And beyond CRUD, I'll be adding more features that will show off Vue and Cloud Firestore as well. And beyond that, we'll also get into some of the more advanced features. At the moment, I'm trying to stay away from your build tools and your CLIs and things like this because I want them out of the way. I just want to focus on Vue and Firestore. But ultimately I will sort of start to ease us into using the CLIs and components and all of these slightly more advanced features, but I just don't want them to get in the way of building out a very simple, straightforward app and showing you how to be productive with both Vue and Firestore straight from the bat. So thanks for watching, really appreciate you taking the time to watch this. I hope you'll stick with me and watch the next few parts of this tutorial as I release them, and I hope to see you there. Take care, cheers, bye now.